Hey guys, in this video I'm going to be talking about some standard ways that you can mix an electric lead guitar sound in the context of a typical pop rock song. The first thing I'll do is show you how I achieve the sound that I've recorded into Pro Tools. Second, I'll take you through my signal chain that I'm using during the mixing stage, show you all the effects plugins, and talk you through the processing that I'm using each step along the way. Finally, I'll show you some things that I like to do to get the lead guitar to sit better in the overall mix when other instruments are going on. And the main thing that I'll show you is how to automate some of the parameters inside of your plugins so that maybe for different parts of the song, the lead guitar can come out front more. In other parts of the song, it kind of sits back more in the mix. So let's get started. Here's my Pro Tools session that I've been using for a while. It has your basic instruments for a pop rock song. I have the drums on a single mix down here. Then I have percussion with the tambourine. Then I have 2 acoustic guitar tracks going. I have 2 rhythm guitar tracks, a Strat and a Les Paul. These are just playing chords, and they're panned out hard left and hard right. And they're going to this bus right here I have called electric. If you want to see how I'm mixing these other instruments, you can check out some of my other videos. But in this video, I'm going to be focusing on the lead guitar tracks that I have right here. So I have actually identical tracks as far as what they're being mixed here, and they're both panned to the center. And I have running in parallel a stereo delay or echo effect going on as a insert send. And I'll get to that more later on. When I'm talking about the different effects and things that I like to use. Then I have the bus tracks, and then I have my stereo master fader and the talkback microphone. Just to give you an idea of the mix, let me show you what I've got. So here are the 2 lead guitar tracks. And if you look here, I'll switch over to the waveforms so you can see them. Really, what I've done is just recorded alternating back and forth for the different parts of the song. The lead guitar track, I guess here at the end I kind of double it up. But for the most part, what I've done is the lead guitar kind of alternates back and forth on these tracks, but it's really just one part that's going for the song. And then rather than having to worry about recording the perfect take for the whole song over 3 minutes, I just record, about 20 seconds at a time and get the takes exactly how I like them. Let me play you back the song so you can hear it, and just listen for the lead guitar that's in the center, pan to the center, and that should give you an idea about how it sounds. Alright, so hopefully you got to hear and see a few things going on just to give you an idea about the part that I'm playing. So these, the lead guitar, it does alternate back and forth for the different parts, kind of the intro, then it goes here for the verse, then it goes back for the chorus part. And I'll play them back just so you can hear them in isolation too. Here's the raw, unprocessed sound. All right, so that's, I'm not playing any kind of really fancy lead parts, but what I'm really just trying to do with the electric guitar for this mix is provide just a little bit of melody kind of going on for the intro and kind of a counter melody going on during the verse. So I'm playing, a couple notes at the same time, or just picking out individual notes. This kind of style of playing is very popular, typical maybe of pop rock music in the past, I don't know, 10 or 15 years. I think of someone like The Edge from U2 playing this style of music, but basically after that, it's been adopted by so many different kinds of guitarists in many different styles of music that it's pretty much just the commonplace for any kind of pop rock music that you might hear to have this kind of lead guitar sound. I use the term lead loosely because it's not like I'm playing full, melodies or anything like that. I'm just sort of providing a little bit of extra interest, melodic interest in the song, even though I'm not really playing, full on melodies. It's just sort of like a lead guitar part. Let me show you what I've done to achieve this sound that I've recorded. I have all these plugins bypassed, so you're not hearing any of these. You're just hearing the raw guitar sound that I've recorded. In some of my other videos, I go more in depth about how I record it, but basically I'm using an amp simulator effects pedal, the Pod HD 500, and I've got the Line 6 Variax 700 electric guitar plugged into the floorboard, and then I have the signal coming out of the floorboard going into my Digi 002 interface that I'm recording into Pro Tools. It's a pretty basic amp simulator sound. I don't have a lot of effects going into Pro Tools that I'm recording. It's just a single amp, and I'm using on the Variax 700, I'm using the Gibson semi-hollow body 335 electric guitar sound on the bridge pickup, and then it comes in here, goes through a light compressor that's not doing a whole lot, just compressing the signal a little bit, bringing up the overall level a little bit to kind of hit the input stage of my amp a little bit harder. Then I have the amp going. This is a Dr. Z amp model. I'm running it with a SM57 microphone. These are the settings basically. Nothing really to it. There's a delay pedal I have bypassed because I'm going to add the delay in later on. So it's basically just a compressor, just doing a little bit of work to drive the input of the amp. I have, a relatively low amount of gain going, but it's adding just enough crunch to make the guitar smooth, the signal sound smooth, and also just make it a little bit more interesting with some nice harmonics. So that's the sound that I've recorded, and I'll play it again so you can hear the sound. All right, so nothing fancy coming in. But let me take you now through the signal chain now that I've showed you how I'm recording it. And like I said, the sound that I've recorded is identical for lead 1 and lead 2. It's the same exact settings on the Pod HD 500. And then I just record them back and forth throughout the different parts of the song. So just to give you, let me run through the beginning, maybe just highlight this part, and take you through the signal chain so you can hear what I'm doing. So I'll play it back and walk you through it. The first thing that I like to do specifically is to do some subtractive equalization. So I'm using the Waves Q3 here. It's part of the Q10 plugin. This is a digital equalizer. It doesn't really try and model any kind of actual analog equalizer. It just tries to be a very precise equalizer, digital equalizer. And then one other thing that I like about it is it's very low on the CPU processing. So right away, I know that I just want to do very subtle subtractive equalization. What that does is just takes out some of the problem frequencies that I hear in the signal. I'm not boosting at all, and I'm using some kind of a narrow Q to pull out just a few frequencies that I don't like. And I'll play it back and I'll show you those frequencies and why I selected them by increasing the gain and then pulling the gain back out. But the idea at this stage is to just clean up the signal ever so slightly by using this subtractive equalization to take out the frequencies that kind of resonate a little bit too much or dominate the sound of the signal coming in, so that it sounds clear, it sounds crisp, and it sounds clean, even though it has a little bit of distortion on it. The main thing is that the signal just sounds pure. So let me play it back and show you what this equalizer is doing. So here I've bypassed each of the... So now what I've done here is bypassed each of these parts of the equalizer, and I'll add them back in, and I'll show you the frequencies, and you can hopefully hear why I decided to take them out. So here's the first one. It's right around 600. And a lot of this, the thing with subtractive equalization is it's not, because the Q is so narrow and you're just pulling out individual frequencies, there's not like a hard and fast rule that you can apply across every single time you record your electric guitar. It really depends on the specific signal that you've recorded. So it's not, maybe every time you record a kick drum, you're always going to boost around 100 hertz. You're always going to take out around 250 hertz. This kind of subtractive equalization is different in the sense that you're looking for that very specific frequency in the signal that you've recorded and taking that out. So you can't just look at my equalizer and say, oh, he cut out 971 hertz. I better cut out 971 hertz on mine. The main idea is I'll show you is you can sweep around by boosting. Here, I'll boost this, sweep around, and then you'll hear right around 1,000 hertz or maybe a little bit less. You kind of hear how it resonates a little bit too much and doesn't really sound that good. So that's the one you want to pull out. Finally, this last one. So that's the subtractive equalization that I've used right away off the bat. Just to clean up the signal as soon as it comes into Pro Tools and I've recorded it, the first thing I want to do is just clean it up in the first stage of my signal chain. Then the next thing that I'm doing is adding some kind of special effects plugins that simulate what it would be like if you recorded onto analog tape and with an analog console. So first one I've got going right now is a Slate Digital VCC. I've got it set on the SSL model. I've got the gain boosted up a little bit. I've pulled the input signal down a little bit just for gain staging, that I'm not driving it too hard. Just to show you some settings that I've got. I'm using the high oversampling. People have asked about in the past on some of my other videos, what can I do so that my computer, if my computer isn't fast enough to keep up, or maybe I'm having the problem that Pro Tools is complaining that I need to increase my hardware buffer size, but I've got my hardware buffer size increased as large as possible. What are some things that I can do with the plugins so that maybe they don't occupy so much CPU processing? One of the things is if your plugin has things like oversampling that I've got here, is to turn the oversampling off. But if your computer can handle it, then by all means use the oversampling, because it'll be good when for these kind of effects that add in saturation, distortion, or that are kind of non-linear processing. Using the oversampling is just going to make it sound as good as possible. So if your computer can handle it, by all means do it. So this is what I've got. The VCC Slate Digital console, really what it does is it, as I was saying, this kind of plugin just adds a little bit of extra warmth to the signal that comes in by adding a little bit of nonlinear processing. Maybe it does a little bit to the dynamics of the input signal too. It's really difficult to describe, but I'll kick it on and kick it off and bypass it, and you can hear really if you think that it's doing something. To me, what I'm hearing is doing something very, very subtle, and I like that it's very subtle. I don't want an extreme effect going on. I've already got distortion going on from the amp. I know later on I'm going to be doing some other kinds of effects and stuff like that, so I just want, at this stage, just to do a little bit to make the signal warm, maybe smooth it out a little bit, and especially if you're using things like amp simulators that can at times sound harsh. And one of the main criticisms of amp simulators is that the high end, it sounds kind of digital, it sounds brittle. These kind of processors, the VCC and the next one I'm going to show you, the Slate Digital VTM, are really good for amp simulator plugins, of kind of taking off that high end that makes the amp simulator kind of just sound sterile and digital, and make it sound more pleasing and what it would be like if you were just recording, hopefully, a real guitar amp in a real studio with real microphones, and have a real tape machine and a great console. But not all of us have that. A lot of us have to just mix inside of our apartment. So these plugins are great for if you're just trying to do that. So here's the VTM plugin. I'll show you the settings I've got. Basically, all I've done with the standard settings is just backed off the simulated tape noise or the hiss. I don't really like that. So I've taken that out. I just boosted up the input signal a little bit. You can see the output compensates for that and comes down a little bit. I left the bias how it is standard. Left it on the standard 2-inch 16-track tape, and the FG456 tape type. The one thing I have changed is the speed, and the speed does make a big difference to my ears when you're using the plugin. And specifically, I've switched from 30 inches per second down to 15 inches per second, because a slower tape speed is going to decrease the top end and kind of increase the frequencies and amplitude. When I'm saying decrease or increase the amplitude of the low frequencies. So that's what the 15 inches per second is known for. Nice present low end and smooth decrease in the top end, and that's great for electric guitars, especially that kind of have some distortion to it. I really like to use a slower tape speed. So that's my one recommendation with the virtual tape machines. Again, I'll bypass it and you can hear how it sounds. Again, sort of like the VCC, the VTM is there to add a little bit of warmth. At the same time, do a little bit. Tape is known for having its own kind of compressor characteristics, and so what I'm hearing with the VTM is that it's kind of bringing up a little bit of the sustain in the electric guitar, which is exactly what I want. I'll play it again and just hear. You can hear it briefly. I'll move on. Cool, so that's all I wanted to show you. The next part of my signal chain is to do some actual compression. I'm using the Waves CLA compressor series. The first one I've got going on is the CLA 76. This is a model of an 1176. It's a very famous compressor. It has the option to have a very fast attack and very fast release. You sort of control the compressor with the input knob by turning it up. You're driving the compressor, and it will kind of decrease your signal level. And you can see the gain reduction going on here. By bringing up the input, you are going to decrease it more. But then you also have to control the output. You can kind of play with these together. You know, if you want to have less compression, you kind of bring down the input, bring up the output. Or if you want to have more compression, you can bring it up the input and bring down the output. I have it set on 4:1 ratio, so that's basically above some threshold of the compressor. Every 4 dB that goes through, the compressor is only going to let 1 dB out, in theory. However, with some of these analog compressors, they weren't always as precise as some of the digital compressors that can be very precise and exact now when implemented in plugins. But that's what's kind of cool about the analog model plugins is maybe it's not exactly a 4:1 ratio, but it's a little bit more dynamic in the sense that it might be 3:1 or 4:1 depending on how hard you hit it in different kinds of signals. Same with the attack and the release. They don't really say exactly how fast and how slow this is. I have it set kind of on a medium level, but it doesn't really tell me how many milliseconds I've got for the attack, how many milliseconds for the release. I just have the release set as fast as possible and attack sort of in the middle. What I'm trying to do with this plugin is a couple of things. First, the CLA 1176 adds some specific color without even doing any compression. It's going to make the guitar sound different. And it even has a setting here for compressor off, where you're not even doing the compressor. All you're doing is just adding in that 1176 modeled analog sound. And so I like that. It's very obvious to me when I fire up the 1176 what kind of sound it's adding. And I really like the Blackie model compared to the Bluey, especially for electric guitars. I think that are distorted. I like the Blackie a lot. Some other people like the Bluey. It's up to you to decide. But that's just a different kind of modeled compressor, a different version of the 1176. So that's really the point of what I'm trying to do with the compressor. It's just doing just a little bit of work right now to clean up the signal with a medium fast attack. There's a little bit of the transient that'll go through the compressor. And then a fast release is after that signal drops below the threshold, then it's going to stop compressing the signal very quickly. So let me play it back and turn it on and off and you can hear it. One of the things that I hear is it just sort of one thing that's going on is it's kind of smoothing out the signal, and another thing, the kind of analog flavor of the color that I think it adds is it just scoops out the mid-range ever so slightly so that it just sounds more natural for an electric guitar, and the mid-range doesn't kind of resonate too much. I'll play it back again and you can hear that. Cool. So what I actually do is have two compressors back to back, and the next one is the CLA 3A. This is a LA 3A model. And a lot of people rave about this compressor for electric guitars. It's even known more than maybe kind of similar how 1176 compressors are known for drums. The LA 3A is known specifically for electric guitars, for having a great sound with it. And kind of adding its own kind of color. So that's why I kind of like how each of these modeled compressors, they add a little bit unique sounds of their own to each of it. The 1176 model kind of scoops out the mid-range a little bit. You can hear the LA3A and what it's doing. Again, I'm just adding 2 back-to-back compressors, just a little bit of compression, not too much. To me, what I'm hearing is it kind of sharpens up the top end, not in a way that makes it sound too harsh or brittle, but what it's doing is it makes it sound nice and crispy, which I like. Again, the controls on this plugin are similar to the other ones, except you don't even have a ratio setting, you don't even have attack and release. You really just have the input that you're kind of, rather than increasing the input signal, you're kind of decreasing the peak reduction. It's sort of a similar kind of thing, but you just control this to change how much you're reducing it, and then you have your output gain that pretty much can be used to compensate for whatever peak reduction you're doing. So that's that compressor that I'm using. I like to use them back to back. They each add their own thing. I'll play it again so you can hear it. Alright, so hopefully you can see one thing that I'm trying to do with the compressors is to level out the overall signal so that I can bring up the signal and it will constantly be pretty loud. And I want especially for the introduction of the song, the intro part, the electric guitar to be loud. I don't want it to have some parts that are loud and some parts that are quiet. I kind of want the whole thing, the whole performance to be nice and present in the mix. So that's a big reason to use compressors in general, is just so you have a way of processing the dynamics or the amplitude of your signal so that it can be controlled better in the mix rather than having to automate the faders to turn them up and down. You can sometimes use compressors. In this case, that's what I'm using them for, apart from just adding analog color to kind of shape the dynamics of the signal so that then I can increase it in the mix so that it sits on top of everything. So that's what I've done so far. Subtractive equalization, some special effects to simulate analog hardware. That's an analog console and virtual tape machine. And then I've got 2 compressors back to back. The next, I'm going to be using the SSL E channel. This is a model of a solid state logic console. And I'm not even using the compressor on this. I've already got the compressors going. But basically what I've done is I've called up a CLA preset, the Guitar Amp 3. I've made small adjustments to it. But you'll see, I'll walk you through each of the steps along the way and what I'm doing. So I'll bypass it and play it and you can hear it. All right, let me take you through what I've got now. I'm not using any dynamics, just basically using the E channel's equalizer. What I've got right off the bat is a high pass filter or a low cut, and what that's doing is everything in the low frequencies are being shaved off the signal. What that's going to do is a couple of things. First, you don't want any signals in your overall mix that are going to be below 20 hertz, even though the human ear can't hear them. What you don't want is those signals hitting your output fader, and what that's going to do is your limiter is going to process them and all these things, and it just causes problems. So what you want to do is, in almost all instruments, have some kind of high-pass filter enabled. In this case, I've got it going at 50 hertz to do that. What this is also going to do is make space for things like your kick drum in your signal. If you've got your mix going on, by having this high pass filter. And then I also have a low pass filter here on the top end. So this one was down at 50 hertz. This one's actually up near almost 10,000 hertz. And what this is going to do is take off all the high frequencies that are above 10K. This is important because, like I was saying before, an electric guitar through a guitar amp, and especially an amp sim, can sound harsh on the high end. So I'm using this by taking off the top end above 10K. What this is going to do is make it sound less harsh. So there's not a lot of energy in the signal already that's up around 10K to 12K, but I just want to take it off and smooth off the high end, shave off any of those high frequencies so that I definitely don't have the risk of having my guitar sound harsh. Then I've boosted in a couple different places. I'm using a semi to a little bit narrow of a Q up around 7K, and I'm boosting just a few dB, and that's all. What this is going to do is, again, make that top end nice and clear and help the guitar cut through by having those high frequencies present. Then what I'm doing is boosting down around the fundamental frequency of the notes that are being played. So somewhere around 300 hertz and up around 100, between 100 and 300 is really the kind of the part of the signal I'm trying to boost, so that especially for the lead guitar, that those notes are going to be loud. And the fundamental notes of the signal, by making them loud, it's going to make the guitar more present that you're hearing. So let me play it back and show you these things. And kind of the opposite of what I've described. Basically, what I've said is I've boosted the low end, I've boosted the high end, but you could just as well say what I've really done is de-emphasized the mid-range. So it's kind of just a product of this is just kind of scooping out the mid-range by making the top end more present, making the low end more present. And that's kind of a typical thing to do when you've got an electric guitar. Don't overdo it, but it just makes an electric guitar sound natural and fit well in your mix. You want to make plenty of space for your vocal. That's going to be around the more of the mid-range, so that your vocal can cut through anywhere between 300 and 1,000 hertz. You want to make sure that you're not taking up space with your lead guitar in those kind of frequencies. The last thing that I've got in my signal chain is actually a modulation effect, and this is a modulation effect that comes as part of Pod Farm. I think that the effects plugins that it has, especially some of these modulation plugins. So this is just an Elements one, and so it's just got all the modulation effects that come in the Pod Farm thing. If you're interested more in Pod Farm or anything like that, check out my other videos. I go into more depth on that. But this one, I've just got the analog chorus going. I've got the mix down here, and it's not very loud. And what this is just going to do is all I'm trying to do, I've got the speed very, very low and the depth pretty low, is just add a little bit of that chorus sound, that modulation sound that thickens up your sound. And I don't know it's difficult to describe. It kind of makes your guitar sound a little bit more interesting by making it more dynamic. Or when I say dynamic, just it means that it's changing a little bit over time. Not necessarily not like a dynamics processor or like a compressor or something like that. By dynamic, I just mean that the sound of it just sort of changes a little bit over time by having these kind of modulations going on in the signal. I don't want to go into too much depth about what chorus is versus flange and things like that, but I'll bypass it. And this part of the song I'm not using a whole lot, but I'll show you what I'm doing later on when I want to include it a little bit more. So I'll play it back. So hopefully you can hear this is a very subtle effect the way that I've used it right here. In other cases when you're using lead guitar, maybe you want to make it more dramatic, you adding the chorus. But what I've just tried to do, I don't want it to be a noticeable effect. What I really just want it to do is be more of a thickener than the true chorus. I really want this kind of effect just to be something to thicken up the signal. So that's what I've got going on here. I'll play it back and just take you through each of the plugins again so you can hear along the way what each of them have added to the signal. Here's where I started with. Let me play it back so you can hear it in the context of the mix. All right, so that's what I've done so far, and that's just that's kind of just like the process signal that I'm using. The other thing that I usually use, and that's very typical of this style of guitar, is to add in some delay or some echo. Here I've got the signal being bussed on a send here to 1314 that I've got on my lead echo channel. This is an auxiliary channel in Pro Tools. I've got it set up 1314, and what happens is you turn up here on the two channels. Let me bring it over here. Okay, so you've got each of them as identical again on the two channels, and bring it up and down, and that is the amount of signal that's being sent over here to this channel, and I've got the delay plugin going. I've got it, so this is the H delay from Waves. It's kind of it's part of their hybrid line, so it's sort of like an analog sounding delay with like digital controls. So it's got some very unique controls on it that make it really cool, make it very flexible, but it also has a nice analog sound to it. Here I've got it set all the way on dry and wet, and that's specifically because I have this as a send effect, and so I just want only the echoes coming through on this channel. So I've turned the dry basically off and turned the wet fully on. So that's how I've got that sitting. You can play around with these different analog colors. One of them's kind of like a tape color. One of them's more like just different kinds of analog delay and sounds, depending on, these are different famous delay sounds. You can try them out on your own if you're interested. I don't want to show you too much here. I've got the feedback turned down, and so what that's basically just going to do is like a single delay that occurs, rather than having these delays, the same sound over and over and over and over and over again. I just want there basically to be like a single one, and that's going to be I've used a dotted eighth note, and that's a very typical setting, going back to someone like The Edge and U2, things like that. I don't listen to it very much now. I listened to a lot more growing up, but I think that there are plenty of other people that have copied that sound that I hear on the radio now. And what the setting is that you're trying to achieve is the dotted eighth note with a low feedback, and that's the delay. And this one syncs to your DAW host. So I've got the song at 74 BPM. And what this is going to do is make sure that the delays are perfectly in time with the song. I've got a little bit of modulation going on. Actually, I've got it turned off. The rate is just up a little bit. Okay. I've got the low pass filter turned down a little bit. So what this is going to do is kind of take off the high ends of the delay and make it more analog sounding by just focusing on more of the low frequencies. So let me play it back. At this point in the song, I've got the delay turned down pretty far. So let me move on to the next part. Maybe with the individual notes, you can hear it a little bit better. Again, all I'm really trying to do with this plugin is just add a little bit of space, add a little bit of dimension to the guitar part. Nothing too dramatic going on at this point in the song. So hopefully you could hear the delays there. So that's really all I've done with the delay. Again, it's very subtle what I'm mixing in. I don't have it over dramatic during this part of the song, just because I want the main lead part to be pretty dry, but add just a little bit of echoes to make it sound like it's coming through space and give it just some dimension to it. So I've got the lead down pretty low right there. But what I want to show you is move on to a different part of the song where I'm going to do things a little bit different, specifically because I want the lead is taking more of the actual solo in the song. So up until this point, basically I had the introduction of the song where the lead kind of has a nice melody, but it's not necessarily playing a solo. Then there's a verse part. I don't have any lyrics or anything going on in the song, but that's where this part is. So that's this part where it's playing more individual notes. Then I've got the chorus. All right, so those are the parts. But then there is a part later on where I have the lead guitar kind of in the bridge taking a solo. So let me play it back for you and show you what I've done. Here's the lead part. So it's kind of repeating a similar guitar part from the song earlier, but then it's also going to take over and add in a little more of the melody for the song at the same time. And if you'll watch, what I'm doing is I'm automating the echo part. And what I thought was during that initial part where the guitar is sticking to that same, repeating the same guitar part from before, the echo's down. But as the guitar starts to go away from that typical theme and add something new and play more of the melody of the song, I'm bringing up the echo and making it more present in the mix and adding just that extra little effect during this part for the lead. By having that more of the delays, it kind of fills in the parts between the notes, but at the same time also just gives it a little bit more dimension and space. So I'll play it again. You can hear and watch, and then I'll take you through how I'm automating it. Alright, so that's the lead guitar part. I should mention at this point what I've done with the panning also. So this is a stereo echoes going on. I've sort of panned them to the center, just a little bit to the left and a little bit to the right rather than fully right and fully left. What this is still going to do is keep the lead guitar focused in the middle of your stereo field, but also by having it a little bit left and a little bit right, let the delays kind of bounce back and forth a little bit to make it more interesting. Let me show you what I've got, how I've automated how it changes. So again, the volume is the thing that I'm automating here in the lead echo. So I've got it set on volume over here. These are the different ones, pan left, mute, things like that. And all I've done, if I zoom in Pro Tools, if you want to automate it, you can click on it with this hand, or you can also draw it in with the tool, the pencil tool. And so I just bring it up at different points and then bring it down at the end so that it goes back to the original level for that I'm using the rest of the song. So the rest of the song, it's kind of quiet. Just during this part, I'm bringing up the volume of the delay more. So that's all I'm doing with the delay. There's one other thing that I'm doing that I haven't showed you that I'm automating, and I'll show you here in the plugin. And that's what I'm automating is the mix of my chorus. And what I'm doing with that is the chorus, again, I talked about it before, is it thickens things up a little bit. And by having the mix down, I'm using the mix kind of to control how thick I want it to be. So by the end of that lead part, I actually want the chorus to be a little bit more present and a little bit more dramatic of an effect. To thicken things up, but maybe even take it into the realm where you're hearing it as an actual, the chorus as a modulation effect and not just as a thickener. So let me play it back and watch what's going on with the knob. You'll see how this one changes. Alright, so what I'm trying to do, just like with the echo, is throughout this lead part, this melody part, I'm just trying to build up, make it a little bit more dramatic, very subtly, by increasing the mix here so that the chorus does its thing a little bit more and is more dramatic. Same with the echo. Bring up the volume of the echo to make it a little bit more dramatic. And by the end of this, the lead part, it's kind of reaching the climax of the song. And so I'm doing that kind of by modulating these parameters ever so slightly, just to make the part a little bit more interesting. So let me show you what I've done to achieve this automation. There's a couple different ways of doing the automation inside of Pro Tools. The simplest way, though, is if you've got a Mac computer, is to hold down Control Option Command and then click on the parameter that you want to automate. Alright, so after you enable the automation, then you can come over here and look. What I've got down here is the mix here. It'll show up. So I've got the Pod Farm mods as my plugin, and I'm going to go to mix. So this is the parameter that I've going to automate. By clicking on that, then it'll bring it up down here. Similarly to what I was doing is automating the volume of the delay. Now I'm going to automate the mix. So before it was just around 31%, and by the end of this, I'm bringing it up to 45%. And so what I've done is just automate that so that then by the end, I'm having the mix of the chorus come up and be more dramatic. And that's really all I'm doing on the sound. Let me go back and I'll give you guys a chance to hear from the beginning again, the different guitar parts. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you are interested at all in taking a closer look at the mix. Maybe you have some of the same plugins that I've got. Some of the things like the Slate Digital plugins, the Waves plugins that I like to use. Or maybe you don't have any of those plugins, but you want to look at the Pro Tools mix because you got Pro Tools. You want to just see how I'm doing things more in depth in your own sessions. Some people have requested it from me, and so what I've done is I've saved a Pro Tools session that I can share with you, and you can either get the full session with all the plugins that I'm using, just so you can try it out on your own and have access to exactly what I'm doing, or I can also just send you the stems, so the individual parts, the drum mix, the percussion, the acoustic guitar mix, each of those individual tracks. I have that uploaded as well. And if you just send me a private message on YouTube, what I will do is either send you the link so you can download the stems, or send you the link so you can download the whole Pro Tools session. You can mix it on your own if you like. Use your own plugins, or use the plugins that I've got. Look specifically at the settings that I've got if that's of interest to you. So just send me a message. I'll be happy to provide you that link. I've already got it set up for other people, and I'd be happy to provide that link for you. So thanks for checking out this video. I'll play you back from the beginning, and you can hear the lead guitar part again. And take care, guys, and I'll catch you again soon.